Hello and welcome. Thanks for your interest in the natural history of the bridgers and the bangtails. I'm going to talk to you about wildlife. There are two factors that contribute to the host of plant and wildlife supported in the bridgers and the bangtails. One is the habitat diversity in a fairly small area, and the other is its location as a connector in a corridor. The mosaic of soils that Cliff Montaigne talks about in his presentation create a foundation for a mosaic of vegetation and habitat types in a relatively small area. This map shows various habitat types. The area is described as an island of montane forest within a sea of lowland steppes. So we have everything from alpine forest, both deciduous and coniferous forest, grasslands, areas with human use, wetlands, just little ribbons of wetlands going through the areas that are recently disturbed, and if these are in a patchwork, they can contribute to habitat diversity. We have shrublands, the pale yellow, and then very sparse and barren rocky lands also. The bridgers and bangtails are a major corridor from the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem to Canada. So if you look at, here we have the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It's a corridor, a connecting corridor up into the big belts and into this area up in Canada. This corridor is very important for the dispersal of animals, for them to expand their ranges, and in particular for them to maintain their genetic diversity across the region. Changes in wildlife habitat in a small area such as ours that is providing such an important corridor has implications way beyond just our small, our small area. It has implications for what happens to wildlife populations in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, as well as wildlife populations to our north. This map is provided by the Craighead Institute, and it illustrates the important connection between the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the north. Bozeman Pass, here somewhere, there we go, is a very critical crossing point from this area up into this area. In a study from 2001 to 2010, there were 2,272 animals that were killed along this 24-mile stretch of the interstate. Hopefully, a few more than that made it across. An example of one individual that did cross, most likely, was the lynx that was transplanted from Canada down to Colorado. In 7 years, he traveled 2,000 miles back home, and he was trapped near Banff National Park, close to where he came from originally. And very likely that lynx came down from Canada up through here and possibly passed through the Bridger-Bangtail area to go back home. So now I'm going to give you an example of how wildlife do use the Bridger-Bangtail area. There are year-long residents with seasonal movement. An example of that is elk. They stay low in the winter and move up in the summer. They congregate on winter ranges. Any of us that use the area have certainly seen them on the roads and down in the lowlands in the winter. Usually they're on south-facing slopes where the snow melts off quicker. And then they disperse widely as small groups in the summer, especially around calving time, to upper meadows and forested areas. Another example of year-long residence with seasonal movement is deer. White-tailed deer enjoy the brushy cottonwood river bottoms and riparian areas in particular. Mule deer tend to prefer sagebrush, and they spread through the mountain woods in the summer. Mule deer can eat drier and coarser foods in the drier areas and shrubs, whereas whitetail like more succulent foods that they find down in the wetter creek bottom areas. During the winter, mule deer use south-facing slopes, as do the elk, which are bare of snow earlier. Please remember that feeding deer and elk is not good for them as a whole, and it is definitely illegal. An example of year-long residents with small seasonal movements are moose. We have two tribes, so to speak, both of which winter in very small areas. Some moose use mountain meadows in summer and winter at high elevations, and in the winter they are in multi-story dense canopy forest, which provides protection from deep snows. Other moose tribes summer and winter in thick meadows for browse, so they tend to stay in the same area rather than moving between meadows and forested areas. Those moose are very closely connected to beaver, which are year-long residents that don't move a whole lot. There used to be a lot of beaver in this canyon. They're responsible for the large flat areas along the roadsides with the very deep, fertile soils. Beaver need willows for food and sufficient water flow to build their lodges to maintain their semi-aquatic lifestyle. They escape from predators by going underwater. So they're important to enhance riparian habitat for moose and other species, but of course they can be problematic and cause flooding where we might not want high water. An example of year-long residents that can't move much are fish. If their habitat is altered, they have no choice. They can't go somewhere else. Bridger Creek once held West Slope cutthroat trout, a current Montana species of concern because of its limited populations. The fish hatchery actually used to use Bridger Creek as a source of fish stock. The cutthroat have been replaced by introduced rainbow, brown, and brook trout. We do, however, have some native species left. The long-nosed dace, mottled sculpin, and mountain whitefish are found in our creeks. The plant community along stream is very important in a lot of ways and should be kept intact to serve as a filter to keep out sediment and other toxins, so to speak. Fish do need clean, clear water to thrive, and if their water again is polluted or becomes sediment loaded, they don't have a choice to get up and leave. The canyon hosts sensitive and imperiled species that are year-round residents. Wolverine and lynx exist in semi-isolated populations with very large home ranges. There intermittent movement among subpopulations, so from here again using the corridor down into the greater Yellowstone ecosystem or up into the big belts, is very important for these species to maintain their genetic viability. If the connectivity is lost, then the whole population is affected, not just the population in Bridger Canyon. Wolverine require areas that are cold enough to provide deep persistent snow late in the warm season. So in our area that means that they're at high elevations, as generally are the lynx. Some season-long residents are definitely more adapted to living with humans than others. I'm sure we've all bumped into these two critters. There are many species that are only seasonally present in the Bridger and Bangtail areas. Sandhill cranes are an example. These are the 747s of birds. I'm always thrilled when they come flying over the Gallatin Range, announcing in their creaky door voice that they're back. So imagine flying up from Texas and going, dang, where'd my meadow go? Bummer. Sandhill need open grasslands and freshwater marshes. They are found along our valley stream beds with moist meadows where they raise their young. There are lots of smaller species that are easily overlooked that are only seasonally present. Dragonflies and, of course, bees, which are very important for the functioning of land ecosystems and agriculture. We do have a few species of bats in the area. The silver-haired bat is a potential species of concern. Not much is known about it, but they have been seen in the bangtails. So they're seasonally present and they do migrate south in the winter. Some animals only pass through. So again, the concept of this being a connector and a corridor. We don't have a grizzly bear population, but we do know that they occasionally pass through, as well as other animals. Raptors use the Bridgers as a very important migration corridor, and that will be talked about, or that is talked about, by Brett in his presentation on the raptors. So the bridgers and bangtails host an amazing diversity of plant and wildlife. They're not present everywhere at all the time, so your parcel of land you might not see something on your parcel of land at a particular time, but it could be very important for a species just during a very short time period in a particular season. Keep in mind that resource management on a given parcel of land will have implications beyond its borders. And what you might think looks very pretty and cleaned up may not be the best for the plants and animals that make this a very special place. If you have questions about specific area or species, contact Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. They're willing to provide detailed information if they have it available. So again, thank you for your interest in the natural history of the bridgers and bangtails.